All right, what's up everyone? It is Monday, and it's my first day of my surgery rotation. I finished up IM last week, and now we have surgery. Just like IM, surgery is going to be an 8-week block, and it's broken up into different subspecialties, but I'll go into that later. Today was just our orientation, so we actually had to go up to campus this morning. I wish they would have done that part just virtual, but it is what it is. So this morning I had to be up there around 8 o'clock. We had a brief sort of intro session from our clerkship leader, and then we had some virtual lectures from a radiologist, which was really good. Went over some very common things that we'll see in surgery, how to read x-rays, CTs, MRIs. It's stuff that we've done in the past, but it's always nice to get a refresher on that, especially because of how integral that is to being a surgeon. Then we also had an ethics and surgery lecture, which was really good. Once again, we've had previous ethics sessions that covered a lot of the same topics that we talked about earlier, but it's always nice to have the more surgery-specific context. Then after that, we had to go to all of our hospital sites. So I had to come back down to the Jersey Shore to go to the hospital with all of my classmates, and we had another orientation there. Thankfully, I was really familiar with the hospital because I did my IM rotation there. Some of my classmates did them at other hospitals, so we had like a little bit of a tour again and saw all of the surgery specific areas. We learned how to get our scrubs every day, got a tour of the surgery department, showed us where the main OR is, and then part of today was learning how to scrub in. They took the newer people, so the people who did their IM rotation at a different hospital, to scrub first, while the other people just kind of relaxed. We actually ended up going to a resident rounds where there was a bunch of residents, a few attendings, and one of the PGY5s was sort of presenting cases that they had recently done and was, for lack of a better term, sort of being interrogated. They were being asked a lot of questions by the attendings, like, oh, why did you do this? What could you have done differently to improve the outcome? That kind of stuff. It got pretty intense at points, but you could tell that it was really just about education, and overall was a pretty productive session. I learned a lot just from sitting there. And actually towards the end of that, the general surgery program director was called into surgery by one of their residents, and as he was walking out the room, he turned around and looked at me and he was like, Jordan, you're interested in surgery, right? I was like, yeah, I am. And he was like, come with me. So he pulled me out of that session and pulled me out of my orientation, really, to go into the OR. Something I totally was not expecting. I hadn't learned how to scrub yet, but he was like, you know what, I'll teach you. It's no big deal. So today, on my first day of my surgery rotation, I got to scrub into a case. It was a hemorrhoidectomy, so nothing too crazy. There was a few residents there, and then I got to scrub in. It was really just watching. I got to retract a little, but regardless, it was really nice that that attending remembered that I said I was interested in surgery earlier on in the day and gave me that opportunity to come into a case with him. The case lasted maybe like an hour, and then I went back to my orientation. It was kind of over at that point. All they really did was go over like a PowerPoint with some logistics, but the sort of admin person said that she'll send me the PowerPoint in case I have any questions. Ended up not really missing much, thankfully. So tomorrow's like our first real day of surgery. I'm probably gonna try to get to the hospital around 5 a.m. That seems to be when most of the students get there. I don't really know what we're gonna be doing because it's our first day, but we'll see. All right, so it is Wednesday. I just got back from the hospital. It's actually still light out, which is awesome. That means it's starting to get a little bit later in the year, thankfully. So just to update you on sort of what has been going on the past few days, I am on trauma my first 2 weeks. The way that our clerkship works is we get 2 weeks of trauma, 2 weeks of an elective, and then 4 weeks of inpatient where you rotate through a few different teams. My first 2 weeks are trauma, which means that we're responsible for responding to any traumas that come into the hospital. It's very different from the other teams because there's really not any scheduled surgeries. So basically how the workflow has been the past few days is we get there around 5, change it our scrubs, all that. Then we've been picking like one patient to pre-round on, so we go and see them maybe around 5:30, ask the nurse if there was any overnight events, check up on them, see how their pain is, do a little physical exam. Then we will go to sign out, which is at 6 o'clock. That is with the overnight team, which is usually a few different PAs. For us, working with the residents, we focus on the trauma patients who have any sort of like intra-abdominal or thoracic injuries. There's a lot of trauma patients who are like purely orthopedic or neuro, which, you know, we're still on the trauma team and responsible for them, but for the most part, we are focusing on the gen surg stuff. So when we go to sign out, it is sort of everyone that falls under the trauma umbrella. There's a lot of patients in the ICU, a lot of patients just on the floor. We go through the whole census, which has usually been between like 15 and 20 people, and get an update from the overnight team to see who's improving, who's getting worse, what needs to be done for them. Then after sign out, we'll go with the residents and round on, like I said, the gen surg focused patients, which are the people that me and my classmates saw before sign out. So as we're walking to the room, we'll give like a short update presentation to them on the patient, you know, something like, oh, I saw Mrs. Smith, she's doing better, less abdominal distension, less pain. These are the meds that she got overnight, blah, blah, blah. Really quick, like 1 minute max as we're walking to the patient room. Then the resident will, you know, ask their questions, do a little physical exam to sort of double check what we did. Then after that, we have a bit of a break. It's like maybe an hour until we do table rounds. And apparently table rounds for trauma is a little bit more academic than the other teams, where even though there's only one trauma surgeon on call, all of the trauma surgeons hop on a Zoom call to talk about all the patients. It's a very like collaborative thing where a lot of these patients are super, super complicated, so you need a lot of brains thinking together to be able to figure out what to do. So that lasts about another hour. We get done around 9, and then sometimes, depending on the attending, we'll do walking rounds. So some of the patients who either we don't have a plan fully fleshed out, or patients that can get discharged or downgraded, we'll go see in person with the whole team. Once again, that probably takes about another hour. And then after that, we're kind of done for the day unless a trauma comes in. So this week has been very slow and there really haven't been any traumas. Some things have come in, but they're just like purely orthopedic, so we don't really have to go to the OR for those. Unless it's something really, really bad orthopedic-wise, they will just kind of stabilize them, give them pain meds, and then schedule something for the next few days. So all I really do is sit in the library, study, and then pay attention to the ED board to see if a trauma is coming in. All right, so it is Friday, just got back from the hospital, and the past few days have been awesome. So Thursday, since I wasn't seeing a lot of trauma cases and there were, we were kind of down a few students in terms of a workforce, I picked up a case on our red team. So we have 4 different teams: red, blue, gold, and green. Green is the trauma patients that I've been seeing. Blue is gen surg stuff, so any like colorectal, hepatobiliary, pancreas, anything like that, anything like intra-abdominal is what is on blue team. Gold is a huge team. There's so many different specialties, so I think it's pediatrics, oncology, endocrinology, and breast. So you get a lot of variety on Team Gold. And then finally, Team Red is vascular and thoracic. So I hopped on a vascular case on Thursday, which was essentially it was a knee amputation debridement. So the patient was having some issues following a below the knee amputation. So we went in and did sort of like a revision. It was great. The attending was awesome, and I'm actually with him for my elective weeks on vascular, which is weeks 3 and 4. So I'm really excited to be able to work with him again in the future. So that was Thursday. Didn't really have any traumas come in either. So that was like the only action of that day. Today, Friday, a very similar thing happened. We have to give presentations as a part of our surgery rotation. So 2 of my classmates who were on Team Red had to give their presentation, so they weren't able to go to any red cases in the afternoon. So I had to sort of fill in for them and go to a thoracic case, which was a robotic lung lobectomy. It was definitely the coolest surgery I have ever seen. In terms of like types of surgeries, there's the traditional open where, you know, you make a huge incision, open the patient up and do everything sort of by hand. Then there's laparoscopic, which is you make smaller incisions and use instruments and cameras on these like long poles to go in and do everything. And then finally, the newest thing is robotic, where you make a few more incisions, have a bunch of different ports, and you have this giant machine. Da Vinci, I think, is the most like common one, and that's the one that we used. But basically, you're able to, as the surgeon, sit in a little console with a bunch of really complex controls and control this robot inside of the patient, which honestly to me is like science fiction. It is so cool that our technology has advanced so much that you can sit and almost like play a video game and be able to do surgery on someone sitting sometimes in a complete different room. So yeah, that was so cool. Like I said, it was a lobectomy. I think they took out like the middle and lower lobes of the right lung. The patient had this weird mass. They weren't really sure what it was, so they needed to send it off to pathology. They weren't sure if it was cancerous or something congenital or what. But yeah, like I said, such a cool procedure. I got to scrub in at the end of it to help close, which was a good experience. And then as soon as I walked out of that surgery, I look at my phone and I see text that we got 2 traumas that came in. So I was planning on like grabbing some lunch or something, but instead I just sprint over to the trauma bay. And things have sort of settled down because I think the trauma came in like 30 minutes prior to me seeing the text, but I was still able to help out. It was a couple that got into a car accident. One of the patients was in much worse condition, and they actually needed to end up going to the OR right then and there for a gen surge issue. One of my classmates went with the trauma attending to go to that. I stuck back with the other patient who was a little bit less critical, but helped like stabilize some fractures and help suture up some lacerations. And then while we were in the trauma bay, a 3rd trauma came in. That one was even less severe, but it was a patient who was struck by a car. So pretty much anytime that happens, you're gonna go to the hospital, usually through the trauma bay, just because there's a lot more resources. And you know, an injury like that can be really dangerous, and you can get a lot of internal stuff that you might not recognize right away. So you need to have some expedited care in that sense. So we did the full workup, did like the point of care ultrasound to check for any fluid, got, you know, a bunch of CTs and stuff, but the patient ended up being fine aside from some like scrapes on their forehead. So very lucky that they didn't have any intense injuries, especially after being hit by a car. Crazy day. I think I kind of jinxed it because I was talking to another surgeon during that robotic case, and I was like, yeah, I'm on trauma. It's been a pretty slow week. And she was like, you shouldn't have said that. And you know, fair enough. As soon as I walked out, we got 3 traumas. It was very cool watching the whole team work to take care of those patients. It's, you know, controlled chaos is how I would describe it, where people are yelling, like there's 10 different people doing different things, drawing blood, doing the ultrasound. There's, you know, an x-ray tech coming over to get x-rays. There's a lot of moving parts, but everyone really knows what they're doing. And yeah, it was just a really cool experience to watch that. And I'm really glad that my school makes us do a trauma rotation. It's not like it's even elective. It's like, no, everyone does 2 weeks of trauma. So that's pretty much it. I mean, it was a good first week. I'm glad I got to go into the OR a few times. This next week coming up is gonna be a little different because I'm actually flying out to San Francisco on Sunday for a conference. There's gonna be a video on that, so be sure to check in next week to see what that's all about. All right, well, that is gonna do it for today's video. If you enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like below and subscribe if you wanna see videos like this in the future. Thanks, and I will see you in the next one.